Hello, this is a Bonzolium production from Essex, Huntington, Briar Lane.
This is my Halloween special. Did I even hit the record button? Yes. Okay, sorry. What I want to it finally dawned on me, I'm going to really try and give my opinions on B8 alloy versus B20. Now these are my opinions. They're not these are going to be more what I consider to be more clinical opinions. Okay, I'm not going to maybe say any words like warmer, buttery, or anything like that. But here, okay, this is my info. Here we have a B20 Avita Zildjian cymbal, 80s symphonic. So it's thinner. I prefer the shape of these babies. And then this is a B8 alloy. It's a Paiste. Remember, Paiste was the first company really, well actually, to use what they call a B8 alloy, which is a higher copper content for their cymbals, okay? Now, as we know, with B20 has been around for like thousands of years, right? Zildjian says they've been around since 1623. And though I think those Zildjians over there, God love them, part of the family, Zildjian, you see the kiln, Zilkan, I think that's how you'd actually pronounce it, Zildjian. Anyway, they've had people for the past probably 4,000 years. Well, one was the Bronze Age, right? That's it, I guess, right? The Bronze Age. Oh, that reminds me of a George Carlin, my friend Murph, God love him. I was in a band with him years ago. He told this joke one time, and it was a George Carlin joke. And he goes, and he's doing he's talking about like next week on the Ed Sullivan Show, but it's not the Ed Sullivan Show. It's supposed to be like a fake show. He's supposed to be making fun of like, what's on next week? And he's like, and it kind of gets a little funny, like he might say like, John Dean's Mistress or something, but then he goes, and Tuesday, the Bronze Age, like deadpan. I think that's one of the funniest things of all time. Anyway, the Bronze Age, right? So this alloy, B20, pretty much, you know, they made stuff, they probably made swords, and they probably tried to make useful things first. But then they realized, I'm sure at some point, that they sounded good kind of when struck. Like, you know, like you'd hit like you know, but then maybe they realized that there was also the dimension not of just a tone like that, but like a different kind of noise, because you have wobbling, right? You can tap a little pot, but it'll make different ways that I think usually are real piercing, right? Which comes in later. But so what happens is eventually, over the thousands of years, this 80% copper, 20% tin alloy is what everyone sort of decided upon, right? I mean, if this is what survives really through that age, that means this won out. That's how evolution works, right? Honest to God. So, what happens is Paiste comes along and says, well, you know, they do say the amplified music. I mean, that's really what it was. In a near field without amplification, like microphones, B20, in my opinion, by its nature, gets washed out. It doesn't carry as far, I think, just generally speaking. I mean, Paiste makes B20 cymbals. I'm not knocking Zildjian, okay? I'm not knocking Satan or anybody. And even, it's just this is what was around, you know. And you can argue whoever's what B20 is better, Paistes or Zildjians or Bosphorus or Dural or whoever, Spizzacino, God bless him, or whatever. But the point is that B20 doesn't really carry. Okay, so in the olden days, when everyone was sitting around fires and stuff, I don't know how big the fires were. Maybe they were like a 30-foot diameter of like the crowd and then the fire or whatever. But if they're dancing around and playing these things, you're going to hear, and it'll sound pretty in a close proximity, right? And over the years, that's just what happens. We didn't have microphones. So this is the sound everybody got used to, 80% copper, 20% tin, probably decided upon, as I said, over the years because it probably sounded the best and was like the best combination of durability and sound and the whole deal. What happens is, so, microphones come along, right? You know the 1950s, like what really happens there is two things. well, we'll just still say one thing, is obviously when did microphones first come out? Probably, Jesus, probably in like the 1800s, right? Some sort, like a gramophone, or some way to record your voice, right? But what comes into like the 40s, well, even the 30s, 40s, and 50s, is in those bigger dance halls, I mean, you really wouldn't hear these unless they were microphone, like, right, mic'd up. So, over those years, eventually I think microphones were coming in, right? I mean, microphones were started to be used for live shows, I think a lot more popularly, at least at more expensive levels. By the time Peisty eventually, I think in like 1965, they said. They might have produced one or two earlier, maybe a different line, but I think the Cymbal 65, and I have one right here. Where is right here? I brought it out for this video, and of course I can't find it. Well, here it is. Okay. Okay, Cymbal 65. So what happens is, especially this early model, you can really kind of, if you have any experience with, if you are like a Zildjian guy or a Peisty guy, immediately you know that sound is a Peisty, because typically we'll hear this alloy as a Peisty cymbal, which generally gives it that sound. Anyway, but what happens is then that higher copper content, lower tin content, results in a cymbal that I think can be heard over further distances. It's just louder, or it just carries farther, right? So by then, maybe we didn't necessarily even need it as much as we might have really in the 20s and 30s, right? It seems like big bands, big dance halls and big bands were playing and stuff. But anyway, nonetheless, it's also a different sound, okay? Which, you know, I mean, so it is a different sound. I need a 20 on here. It's not fair to compare that. Where are my 20s? 20. Okay. No, this isn't a 20. This is a 19. You know, we'll do a... Shit, that's so half-assed to do a 19. God darn it. I'm going for quality, baby. Okay, here is a heavy crash. Okay, you know what? Thank God this is here. Because weight-wise, they're almost... I'd say maybe the B20 might be... or the B8 might be... maybe 200 grams heavier than this guy. Okay, anyway, listen to the pitches. B8. And then B20. Now, the near field thing I was talking about before, I think you can really hear at this field, meaning I'm what, 20 inches from each cymbal, right? And the thing is, this is kind of what I'm getting at. Up close, I think there's genuinely, probably due to like certain acoustics or like, up close, B8 alloy, to me anyway, because it's my opinion, there's a white noise in it a little. There's a harshness to it. Okay, you could argue however you want to define white noise. Let's just say there's unpleasing, not even tones, but like frequencies. Like it's a weird volume. Like it just sounds harsher. Now that could be an opinion totally formed by being so used to B20 alloy. What the hell? I gotta edit that out. Okay, that could be caused kind of by that could really be caused by arguably we've always heard, at least our generation up until, let's say, I mean this might not at all apply to younger guys or people, girls, because they don't really know anything different. I mean, anyway, the point is this. So what I've really thought of is that you can really, I think, quantify sort of a basic, unbiased by any company. Well, let's say, oh, ours are cast. Oh yeah, well ours are, I think just a very objective thing is, by and large, B8 carries a longer distance. B20 doesn't, okay? So, over time, obviously, the point is that this has been the chosen instrument that sounds the best and the most durable. Around close things, campfires and things, or just close gatherings, that's pleasing to the ear, right? So back to the white noise. The white noise at a close proximity seems to be there. There's a dissonance that seems to occur there, okay, at a close proximity. With the Zildjians, I don't usually ever hear, the B20, there's not ever the same kind of dissonance. There might be like you hear tones, like almost like da, tsh, ga, like a train whistle in a weird way. And I think you can really identify those notes. They could be quantified, but the point is up close, and maybe even in general, you don't really hear maybe sometimes, or at least up until the reissue, in my opinion, giant beats came along. Sort of the complexity, you might say, but also non-dissonancy characteristics. In B20 or B8 up close, sometimes that's just, it seems to be inherent in the LA, to me. But over a distance, okay, this won't carry as far. And even if it does, to me what happens is with B20 cymbals, most of them, is from a distance then, you don't even have like a psh, they just sound, I think, real generic. They don't seem to have a personality at a distance, although they really have a personality up close. Whereas B8, the gist, has, I think, a more harsh, abrasive, white, noisy characteristic, or characteristic, but like not a pleasant one up close. But at a distance, that dissonance via the distance is drowned out, or it's just gone. It doesn't carry any further than this in a certain way. Maybe you're this, but out in the distance you get a shh that I think is louder, but also carries better. Like I think then the tone of the B8 alloy, and I'm talking about any B8 alloy, at a distance out there that you hear at a given distance, sounds more pleasing to the ear, more musical than this does at that same distance. So you have like an inverse relationship, kind of. That's what I really think, okay? So, actually that's really what it actually all boils down to, I reckon. Okay? Let's just play them again. Hang on. That's a keeper to me. That's the heaviest I'd ever want a 20-inch B8 alloy cymbal. And that is a great example, because right up close to me, and you'll even hear it on that camera, I'll bet, here's an experiment. Let's see if it turns out to be that way when I watch this. You might even hear, even at this distance, a camera then, I think, should pick up the unpleasing characteristics, right? Let's see if you hear it. Just listen almost for a clipping. I guess it might be a clipping, even with this. But if it almost sounds like a clipping, or almost like a very buried in there, like a teeny bit. Now I'm talking about the initial crash. The after and overtones to me sound terrific, very musical, but I'm talking about the basic attack, okay? I do think, as a rule, generally, when you're up close, to get really technical about it, depending on the distance, up close B8 sounds less pleasing to the ear. Zildjian, B20 sounds a lot more pleasing to the ear. But other things too, like even the nature of the... Let's just play the drums. Okay? That's a, see again, these symphonics I think are so much, well not now. Zildjian the past few years, kind of, they did the A Zildjian in C, the third incarnate of that name. And I think, you know, they were old spec Zildjians, right? I think they wanted to see how they'd sell. Because what happened is real fast with Zildjian, I am going to say this about Zildjian. Paiste did it too, not really I think with their shapes, but generally just with the mass of their cymbal. They increased it through the 70s and into the 80s, even during the 80s and through, model per model to keep up with volume. Or maybe durability. Actually, you know what, honestly, in all fairness, there's two arguments. More volume, but it didn't get louder. Really, music got a lot more heavier, okay? Like the 80s and 90s with like the old metal styles and stuff and bashers and stuff. Anyway, same with Zildjian. But I think Zildjian, what they did was not just beefing the models up per se or putting more weight on the cymbal. It was also changing the shape. They started making their bells, their cups on all the cymbals except for the hi-hats. And I think some 17-inch models and below, right? Hi-hats, although some 16s and 17s did have the big bell, maybe the rock crashes. But they made the bell bigger and they made the cymbal more bowl-shaped. Okay? Remember that basic, when you make something more bowl-shaped, you get more, if you brought that to the extreme, it'd be like a bell. Ping! And that's loud, right? That carries. Of this alloy, 80-20. But what happens is I think just them closing it in like that, making it the whole profile deeper, right? I used to say more bowl-shaped. Really relatively adversely affects the tone in the up front sphere. Or like right here, right around it. You can hear the difference between one that maybe doesn't have, maybe or maybe not, doesn't have as big a cup, but not as much the bowl shape, a flatter profile, okay? So I don't have any of the real bowl shaped ones here because I sold them all off, okay? But I think what what Zildjian did very smartly was give consideration to the older style. Like everything is mic'd up now. It finally dawned on everybody. Wait a minute. We've been mic'd up for 40 years. They don't have to be that loud. They were just kind of following, I think, the trend of like the 80s. So they finally realized, well, our old cymbals were great. You know, I don't know why we didn't consider maybe some of those changes we really started making in the 70s remember that it kind of adversely affected the sound. It was a trade-off. I think it finally dawned on them. I must say I did call them a number of years ago and say it's precisely what they should do, because I honestly really did, but I didn't put it like that. I said, well, you know, your older cymbals were flatter and they were pretty. I don't even think I mentioned amplification or anything, but anyway, I did. I talked to a lady. She was pretty cool about it. But I mean, I'm sure they've been maybe looking into it for years. Obviously, they made the older Ks, and maybe they saw how those sold. Anyway, so finally, A Zildjian and C, I think they sold well. They discontinued them, or they got rid of them for a little while. Maybe it was like a trial run of like a sandwich at McDonald's. They do it for a while to see how it is in Poughkeepsie, Libertyville. But then what they did, of course, is then the Armand series, which to me essentially were the A Zildjian and Cs that they had out for a while before. So then those got discontinued, but then, hey, they redesigned the A line. Okay, there's probably a bunch of really I don't think it's necessarily just a run back to the old days, like they got the old maps out in specs, although I'm sure they did, and maybe made most of the changes on that. At the very least. Definitely the thickness. So, what the hell else was I going to say? I don't know. We'll just play them a little more. Now you hear, but there is the common to all cymbals in the near field. Although I will say, I do want to put and I told Eric Paiste this personally. Those reissue giant beats, I think, are the best B8 cymbals they ever made. They don't all. There's the original giant beat characteristics in them. They are a slightly different shape, but I got to tell you, anyway, the reissues, like I said from the beginning, if you look at all my old posts from 10 years ago on the Drum Forum or Harry Cagney's side, I've been saying these cymbals, even jazz guys, they figured out B8, man. Again, kudos to Zildjian for redesigning the A's, God bless America. I actually bought a pair with the big A on them. And also kudos to Paiste for, I think, Paiste knows B8. You know, I'm such a fool for not trademarking that. I really think it would work. But you know what, though? I told it to Senor Paiste, and I hope they do it. Okay? Okay, Peisty knows B8. Yeah, they do. Anyway, the house is going to explode. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was very helpful, and more videos on the way.